All right, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums here. Today, we're going to be doing the group Dio, featuring the vocal talents of none other than Ronnie James Dio. And to help me do this today, we're bringing in none other than David Hens. Welcome.
Yep. Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, great to see you again. It's been a little while since we had a chance to do one of these things here, so we'll get one more in here before the holidays hit. Looks like. So yeah, what's your take on Dio? Have you gotten a chance to ever? Did you ever get the chance to see him live or anything like that?
The only time I ever saw him live was with the Heaven and Hell show at Darien Lake in 2007.
Yeah,
Which was that was an amazing show, great tour. They were getting along well, but I never got to see the Dio solo band. So
yeah. I kind of missed their first couple tours myself. I finally got to see them myself on the tour for Lock Up the Wolves, which had to go to Toronto to see because oddly enough, they were supposed to play the old Darien Lake Amphitheater, and for whatever reason, the day of the show, we were spent the whole day at Darien Lake. We had like one of those park combo tickets where you go to the park before the show, and then you get to see the show. For some odd reason, probably about noon, we go down there by the where the venue was, and all on the outside of the gates they had signs up: concert tonight canceled. And
wow.
said Matt just took the wind right out of our sails, man. It was like, what? We all ended up leaving Darien Lake by 2 o'clock. It was crazy. So luckily they still had Toronto to play. Like maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe it was like within the next week they were supposed to come to Toronto. So some of the guys that we had like people lined up. There's about 10 of us that were going to go to this show, and then so a few of the diehards really still wanted to see it. So we just ended up getting tickets and going up to Toronto, and yeah, it was pretty cool to see that first time to see him, in that live performance for sure. Wish I would have seen a lot more. I was able to catch a Black Sabbath and a Heaven and Hell show too, but
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
just
I looked up some of the shows. It looks like he played Buffalo pretty regularly up through the late '90s, but he was playing small places. So
yeah. He played even played like the old Blind Melons. I mean
yeah.
that's kind of small for him. He
Hmm.
played Impacts, and then he also played the Funhouse. Believe it or not, 1998. They were supposed to play Millennium, which is on Young's Road there. Which was runways and all that down the road. Blind Melons at one point. They opened it up under Millennium in '98. He was supposed to play there, and then that venue closed up before the show, so they moved it to the Funhouse. So that was, kind of a small place for him to play because he didn't play the bigger sideshow music hall in the back. He played the smaller Funhouse in the front, but nevertheless, a great show, as many people will say who were there. Definitely, that's one thing about Ronnie. He always gave 100%. Put on a great show. So anyhow, let's dig deep into this catalog here, and we're going to start off reverse chronological order here and discuss the albums. So that's going to bring us to none other than his 10th and final solo album, which came out in 2004, Master of the Moon. What do you got for me on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I went back and listened to it earlier today. I mean, there's got some decent material on it, but it's really, I mean, nothing that memorable. I mean, Craig Goldie was back on guitar again, but even, I mean, just the ideas and the concepts, he seemed like his songwriting wasn't quite on the same level anymore. And I mean, I don't know how much interest there was in the type of stuff that he was writing about anyway in '04 because the music scene had changed so much that a lot of the ideas that he was championing were at least from a mainstream perspective, people weren't really into anymore. But I mean, the one song that I kind of liked from it was "One More for the Road," which is actually the opening track of the album.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this one obviously, it's weird how this one. I mean, all 10 of his solo albums actually charted, which was great for him. Sadly enough, only the first three earned any certifications. We'll
Yeah,
discuss that as we go on.
yeah.
But
I think the first two went platinum, and that was it.
right, yeah, yep, and then Sacred Heart did go gold, but
Mhm.
that other than that, like you said, the platinum ones are, that's what usually were the ones you were measured by. So Master of the Moon for me, yeah, I mean, I kind of dug. I thought that was a cool song. The Eyes stuck out for me. But other than that, just like you said, kind of middling, middle of the road kind of songs, not exactly the kind we would expect from Ronnie. We expected a lot more,
Mhm.
especially considering this is one of the better lineups on this album. I mean, this line, if you look at the lineup, he had, like you mentioned, Craig Goldie, and he also had Jeff Pilson on bass. I mean, Pilson's no slouch here.
Mhm.
And Simon Wright on drums. Simon played on a couple of the recordings, and with AC/DC, obviously. So, he had a really good lineup, but the material just didn't suit. Like you said, it just didn't do it for us, unfortunately. So that will bring us to a couple years, 2 years prior, he released Killing the Dragon. And that was 2002. What do you got for me regarding that one?
Yeah, I like this album more than Master of the Moon. Doug Aldrich played guitar on this one, and I remember when the Dead Daisies came to town last year, I interviewed Doug, and I asked him about this album, and he said that he in 1990, before they brought Rowan Robertson into the band, like I guess Dio actually offered Doug the gig back then, but I guess Doug said he wasn't ready for it, so he turned it down. But then, 20 years later, he ends up getting the gig anyway, so it all worked out for him. But his playing on this album is pretty solid. I think there's some good songs. The title track is really good. Along Comes a Spider is really good. But again, I don't. I think in the overall ranking, it's not going to rank very high, but only because the earlier stuff is so much better. But
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point on that. I mean, if you got better albums, it's going to rank higher for you, that's for sure. Killing the Dragon, yeah, it's just another one similar to Master of the Moon. Different lineup, except for the only two members that remain. Obviously, Ronnie and Simon Wright on drums. Like you said, Doug on guitar. And the bass player was Jimmy Bain, of course. That's Ronnie's longtime bass player who played with him through Rainbow and
mm-hmm.
the early albums of the Dio catalog. So yeah. I mean, like you said, I think this album, I think it was just released, not at a good time either. Unfortunately, by 2002, the musical landscape out there was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And Dio tried to keep it similar to the rest of the type of music he was writing. I think
Mm-hmm.
the problem was, though, the music just wasn't as catchy, didn't stand out as much as we will discuss about further albums down the road. But this by far is it's not a bad album by any means. It just, when you got to measure them up against stuff like Last in Line and Holy Diver, it does make it look comparatively weak, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's Killing the Dragon. 2000, 2 years before that, we get Magica. And that one obviously was a concept album that came out here. What do you got for this one?
Yeah, Magical was an interesting one because it's his longest album. It comes in at like 72 minutes, and it's pretty deep. Listen, it's not one that really none of the songs really stand on their own. I think you kind of have to sit down and listen to it from front to back and really get the whole story because there's a whole concept between an underworld where good and evil are at war and it's a battle and everything. So I mean, the ideas were really there, and the sound of the album, compared to the couple that he did before that, he kind of got back to that classic metal sound with the fantastical elements because he kind of changed a little bit in the early 90s to suit the mood of what other metal bands at the time were doing. But then on Magica, he was kind of getting back to the old way a little bit. So
Yeah, this one, I mean, I really wanted to really like this album.
mhm.
Um, you know, tracks that stood out for me were obviously Killing the Dragon. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Uh, Fever Dreams. That's what I meant to say. Fever Dreams. Obviously, it's the one that stands head and shoulders for me above any of the other ones. Um, I mean, this isn't really an album that I would actually just throw on there for the sake of having background noise. I don't know. I just
Yeah.
I think it's actually, I think Killing the Dragon and Master of the Moon definitely were stronger albums by a mile. Magic, unfortunately, to me, I think maybe because of the concept, and I just didn't really get it. I don't
Yeah,
know. That
not
could
very,
that could be.
not very accessible just to like a general audience. So
Yeah. All right, so that takes us to we're going to go to Angry Machines. And obviously enough, this is the one album in the Dio catalog that I don't own. I don't know why I don't own it. I just never was able to get around to getting it. But this album, obviously I've heard it many times. Came out in 1996 and features the lineup of Tracy G on guitar. Once again, Jeff Pilson on bass, and Vinny Appice on drums, and Scott Warren on keyboards. Obviously enough, this is odd that this would turn out to be Vinny's last album out of the solo material that he would play on with this Dio catalog here.
mhm.
So what do you got for me on this album?
Yeah, I mean this. I'm not really a fan of the production on this album. I mean, I think he was kind of like he kind of changed his thematic songwriting a little bit. He was going towards more of like a real life scenario where technology was controlling humans, and they like I mean, Tracy G's guitar tone is pretty menacing. Like he was trying to get a little darker and angry, but I mean, it's not as much of like a joyful listen as some of those early albums. Like it's not very uplifting, but I mean, it's okay. It's not one I go back to that often, though.
Yeah. I mean, this would be the second and last album Tracy G would play on, and I just thought the predecessor to this album was much stronger, stood out a lot better. This album for me, it's there. I mean, it's not bad, but oddly enough, I think it is my probably gonna be ranking as my least favorite Dio album, unfortunately. But
Yeah, I mean, I "This Is Your Life" I think is a great song, but other than that, that's about. I don't really like get into anything else.
yeah. All right, so that does take us to the one I just mentioned, the predecessor, which was Strange Highways, 1994. It actually came out in Europe and Japan a couple months early at the end of 93. So US and Canada had to wait till January of 94. But
Mhm.
that's when we finally saw the light of day, the sixth studio album by Dio, released on Reprise Records. We haven't really talked about the chart positions here because unfortunately they weren't nothing to really write home about as far as the
Yeah.
charts go until we get to the lower, probably the next couple albums. But this album pretty much same exact lineup as the Angry Machines. It's got Pilson on bass, Vinny Appice on drums, and Tracy G on guitar. To me, this album, real quick, it's got a handful of really good songs on here. I really enjoyed, obviously, the Jesus, Mary, and the Holy Ghost kickoff track. Strange Highways is a really good song. Evolution. And like you said, this is kind of where the dark side of
Mhm.
Dio really shows up. This album, it's a perfect example of a dark album, just like you
Mhm.
said. Bring Down the Rain, another really good song on this album. Definitely think this is probably his last really good strong album until out of the tail end of the catalog there.
Mhm.
How
Yeah, I
did
mean,
mhm.
I think between this and Angry Machines, I definitely think this is the superior album. Only, I mean, it's got that dark tone. It's kind of, I mean, Dio kind of goes back to that snarling vocal style that he had on Dehumanizer with Sabbath a couple years before. So, and I give it like Hollywood Black from the album. I think I remember reading that Tony Iommi said they even demoed that song for Sabbath to be on that Dehumanizer album, but they ended up not using it, so they just changed the music and he kept a lot of the same lyrics for his own album. Then when you listen to it, you can definitely hear how Sabbath could have done a version of that. So,
Yeah. That's interesting there, because the Dehumanizer album was when he got back together with Sabbath just a couple years before this time frame here. So, yeah, I think Tony had mentioned something like you mentioned. He thinks it could be the same lyrics, but he didn't think he would use the same music, probably
Yeah.
because it doesn't credit
Yeah.
anybody from the Sabbath thing there. So he must have rewrote it when it came to that. Although, you know, it looks like Appice wrote that song too. So it could have been a Dio Appice song that they presented to
Yeah.
Sabbath. They didn't like it,
Mhm.
and then they just took it elsewhere. All right, now we're going to get into the meat of the order here. So, you know, after a little time there, Dio 1990, we see the light of day for Lock Up the Wolves. And obviously, this was where you have your first real change in the lineup here. You bring in a 17-year-old kid, Roland Robertson, to play guitar for you. You bring in Jens Johansson from Yngwie Malmsteen on keyboards. Teddy Cook on bass. That came out of left field. He used to play with Great White. Simon Wright on drums. And Lock Up the Wolves is born. And you know, this album, you know, it for me, it definitely there's a good handful of songs on here. Like the really good songs on here are real good, but then the ones that are not so good kind of take away from this album for me.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, Wild One, that was like a video on MTV. That was kind of like the lead single. It got the ball rolling. Nice fast paced song. Brought Dio back, you know, back to MTV after not having an album out in a couple years. The title track, one of those nice epic songs that Dio's famous for. Born on the Sun was actually another great song that I really enjoyed. That was one of the ones he played in concert as well. He didn't really go to this album too much in concert. He played a handful of them, but not as many as you would have thought, because Dio was always famous for playing like a good handful of songs from his latest album in concert around this time. Because you got to remember, he still had like all the Sabbath material to play. He all had the Rainbow material to play. So he had a lot of hats to choose from when it came to what material he wanted to play in concert. You know, not only did he have the solo material, he also had those other two bands to draw back on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he definitely took a risk bringing Roland Robertson in, only because people are always going to compare him to the guitar players the game before, and he didn't really quite measure up at that time. So, and I just watched the new Dio documentary over the weekend, and they didn't even talk about this album in the movie at all. So I think that kind of sums up how they feel about it now. But
oh wow,
yeah,
I haven't
awesome. Yeah,
haven't gotten a chance to see that one, but man, how
yeah,
do you
yeah.
gloss over that with the talent on this album? I mean, you got to give Roland Robertson credit. This guy's only 17 years old, and he's like his name's on all these songs as being helping written them. I mean, at 17 years old, here you are writing songs with Ronnie James Dio, and like I said, I mean, you know, he hit it out of the park on a couple of these really good songs. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I like the title track a lot, and I think, I mean, I don't think Ronnie would have given him the opportunity if he didn't think he could live up to it. So
Yeah, definitely. And it's weird that on the CD they got "Why Are They Watching Me," which actually is one of the stronger songs on the CD, but they omitted it from the cassette and the vinyl releases for some odd reason. That one I didn't understand, because there's a lot of other songs you could have dropped in its place, and it is a pretty strong song compared to the rest of the album. So, you know, sometimes I don't know if that's a record company decision or whatever the case may be. Sometimes people don't make the right decisions, unfortunately. All right, so now that's going to take us to 1987. So there was a 3-year gap from the time they recorded "Lock Up the Wolves" to the time "Dream Evil" came out, which was in July of '87. The fourth studio album. So it featured, you know, this is the one where Craig Goldie was brought in and to replace Vivian Campbell. So basically, it's just pretty much the same exact lineup as your previous album, except for the fact that you got Goldie on guitars here. And yeah, this album, I think this is kind of like the dark horse album of the Dio catalog, the most underrated, because he took a shift in the way he was doing things. You go from like Last in Line, Sacred Heart to Dream Evil. You know, he was kind of not really focusing on airplay, trying to get radio songs or nothing like that. He was just making music, and you know, so there's some good gems on here that really never get the just due that they deserve. I mean, I Could Have Been a Dreamer, great song. That was probably the lone song that MTV probably played. You know, I think pretty sure he made a video for that one. All the Fools Sailed Away, though, obviously is the real gem of the album. The hands down. I don't think there's another song as good as that one on the album. But I remember talking to Craig about it, and he was gushing when he was talking about it. He that's one of his favorite songs of all time, and he, you know, obviously him and Ronnie wrote it together, and just an epic song.
Yeah, I mean, I think the album as a whole is pretty divisive, at least from stuff I've read and people I've talked to, because I think people held Vivian Campbell in such a high esteem that anybody who came in after him was going to be automatically disregarded in a lot of ways. But I think Craig's playing on here is highly underrated. So I mean, it's like his solo on Sunset Superman is great. That's one of my favorite tracks on here. But yeah, when you if you look at this is the inner sleeve of the album, and they have the lyrics to "All the Fools Sailed Away" on it. So clearly, they thought that was the centerpiece of the record.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I just love that song. That's probably one. I mean, if we probably end up doing a top 10 Dio song someday list, and you know, even out of all the bands ever been in, that song very much should make the top 10. That's just an epic song that just a great song. I just love that one.
Yeah.
Sentimental. All right, so we're starting to get into the big three per se. The three albums that put this band on the map. Sacred Heart came out 1985. What do you got for the Sacred Heart album here?
Yeah, Sacred Heart. It's a good album. I looked. They played the Odd on this tour, I guess. So
Yep.
he was still playing big arenas at that point. So yeah, I mean, the title track is great. Rock and Roll Children is a classic. But I mean, for me, it's probably the weakest of the three with the original like classic lineup, but it's still a pretty strong record overall.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's the thing, you know, although it's like the first side one, and then you got Hungry for Heaven to kick off side two, and then it kind of, yeah, that's the couple weaker songs close out the album. Probably did it like that on purpose with the sequencing because they knew the stronger material would be better off. You know, you go from King of Rock and Roll to the title track, Sacred Heart, another epic, into Another Lie, which is a crunching song, Rock and Roll Children, Hungry for Heaven, you know. Just Another Day, though, is another one of those. I really like that song. That one stands out. But the other three, like The Beat of a Heart, Fallen Angels, Shoot, Shoot, those ones, yeah, this is kind of where the get that chink in the armor of the Dio starts to come through a little bit. It's just a solid album up until you get to that middle of side two there, but still like you said, very good album. You know, I would definitely take 10 of these albums as opposed to 10 Angry Machines for sure. But yeah, definitely you know, a good album, very good album. You know, and it's obviously this was the last album to feature the main arsenal with Ronnie and Vinny and Jimmy Bain on bass, Vivian Campbell on guitar, and of course Claude on keyboards there. So that will take us to none other than The Last in Line. And obviously this album is a sentimental favorite among many people, including Wendy, his wife, because they felt so strongly that the band that goes out and supports Ronnie now that he's gone took the name from this album for the band.
Yep.
So this album hit the market here in July of '84. You know, produced by Ronnie himself. Only 41 minutes in length, and that's the trick, I think. Too. A lot of these earlier albums, they focused, you know, let's just get 9 or 10 songs out there and see what we got. And the later albums, I think, and that's what I think really hurt the music industry. Unfortunately, the CD age really, really hurt the music industry because all these record companies were always demanding bands to make more albums to fill out the CD.
Mhm.
And if you look back in the '70s, early '80s, even the late '80s, a lot of times bands would just put on 7, 8, 9, 10 songs, and the albums were so much stronger because you're not throwing in that filler that just brought the overall album experience
Mhm.
down. In the
Yeah.
CD age, you hit the skip button, boom, you go to the next track. Most of the time on an
Mhm.
album, you would have to physically get up to lift the needle to slide it over to another song.
Mhm.
A cassette, you had to fast forward it or rewind it. So it's like the CD age really, I think, killed the overall album experience. But if it's your favorite band, you made out because you're getting like 3, 4, 5 extra songs that you
Mhm.
wouldn't have gotten, if it had not been for the CD and the record companies probably pressuring the bands to put these extra songs on. In some cases it pays off, others it didn't. So in this case, you got nine solid tracks. I mean, I can't say a bad word about any of these tracks. Every single song on this album and the previous one, I really enjoy, and that's what makes these albums so strong is the quality of the music and the songs. So, what's your take on the Last in Line as far as which songs stand out well for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the album's a masterpiece, really. I mean, We Rock, great. Egypt is excellent. The title track, obviously. Mystery is a classic, kind of deep cut. And I mean, even when I saw the Apathy Drum Wars last year, the first song they opened with was "We Rock." So I mean, Vinny still holds that song in pretty high regard. So, but just the playing on here is excellent. I mean, there's like for me though, those first two albums, there's so little separation between the two. I mean, I'd probably still pick Holy Diver by a hair, but they're really close. Like if you're gonna follow Holy Diver up with anything, this is about as strong a follow up as you could make.
Yeah, these albums are pretty much neck and neck, just like you said. I
Mhm.
mean, one day you might like this one a smidge better, the next one you might like the other one a smidge better. So
Mhm.
it really all depends on your flavor of the day, what you're going for here. Yeah,
Mhm.
this album, it's odd. I always heard that Ronnie never liked Mystery. Don't understand why. I mean, that song is just the last time I played that song, I go, man, what a masterpiece. Just a great, great song. Not
Mhm.
sure why Ronnie had a thing against it. And he also never really liked oddly enough, Rainbow in the Dark, which we'll talk about. But those for some reason it's weird how the two of his biggest songs he never really liked. Uh,
Mhm.
Odd. Anyhow, uh yeah, I Speed at Night, what a gem. One Night in the City. You mentioned a couple of these songs, like Mystery and just great. Egypt, another gem. That's one of the ones Ronnie would play a lot later on in his catalog as well. Late live shows. But yeah, definitely. If you want to recommend music to anybody from Dio, the first two albums are the ones that you hands down. There's no topping these two.
Mhm.
That's for sure. And obviously, it went platinum on the
Mhm.
heels of Holy Diver, which is the one that we're going to talk about now. Holy Diver, the one that many people say is the best Dio album. He left from the ashes of Black Sabbath and the terrible ending they had with that live album between him and Vinny and the war going
Mhm.
on with Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi over the mixing and all the craziness with that live album, which ended up being the last hurrah for Sabbath up until the reunion in '92 with Dehumanizer. But
Mhm. I still like Live Evil a lot, but there was definitely some animosity over the production. So
oh yeah, I mean there was nothing but craziness during that
Mhm.
whole they would say that the two of them would run into the studio and change the mixes, and the same with when they got done doing it, then the other two would go in there and mess things up. I don't know how true all that was, because you figured that there would have been a producer or somebody, the record company would have, you figure would have had somebody around to keep an eye on things, but who knows? So this album, double platinum, Holy Diver, saw the light of day in May of 1983. What do you got for me on this album?
Yeah, I mean, it was the perfect album, 10 out of 10. I mean, they knocked it out of the park right away. I mean, just Vivian Campbell was already a budding guitar hero at that time, but when he finally put this album out there, he was pretty much solidified his legacy. I mean, Stand Up and Shout, Don't Talk to Strangers, the title track. I mean, Rainbow in the Dark, even though Ronnie didn't like it, it's still one of his most recognizable songs for people who don't necessarily know his entire catalog. So, I mean, even like Straight Through the Heart is a like hard driving riff. It's memorable, you know. Just every song, there's not any skippable tracks on here. So, and even like if the documentary that I just watched, they talk about Rainbow in the Dark in there, and the original demo they made didn't have that keyboard part in it, but they were messing around with the studio and they came up with it, so they just decided to add it on the spot, and that I feel like that's what kind of took the song to another level. So
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah. If you remember, he did a Budweiser commercial
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah,
around the that song. Pretty cool back in the day. Um, yeah, like you said, many of these songs always stood in the set list. You know, years after it was released, you know, he would open up with you know, either Stand Up or Shout or Straight Through the Heart, or he would just go refer back to this album many times.
mm-hmm.
You know, obviously Holy Diver, Caught in the Middle, another gem that's probably one of the least amount of songs that are talked about in this album. But Caught in the Middle is, to me, is one of my favorites. Don't Talk to Strangers, obviously a great song. You know, basically the only song on here that I really and that's probably why for me it's not going to make my number one. Shame on the Night. I don't know, something about that song. I just never really totally got into it. It's an okay song, but compared to the rest of these beasts here, you know, that one for me is like, I definitely consider that the weakest track on the album. But everything else is solid.
Yeah, and the album cover itself is iconic too. So
Yep, this and Last in Line, those are the two most recognizable album covers of Dio's catalog here.
yeah, I don't know if you ever heard the tribute album they did for him in 2014, where they had a bunch of different bands cover his songs.
No.
Yeah, they Hailstorm actually does a cover of Straight Through the Heart on there, which is really good. I mean, Lizzie Hale crushes the vocal on that. So
Yeah, so oddly enough, if you look back through the history, the charted history here of the band for each album, you know, the first five made the top 100, and then after that, all of his rest of his albums were in the over the 100 mark, where they ended up charting as the album in whole. Actually, his highest charting album is, believe it or not, is Last in Line, number 23, and oddly enough, Holy Diver, which many consider his best, 56 only. That's kind of shocking.
mm-hmm.
But I think because he made another album, and I mean, he made Last in Line in less than a year from the time, or just, you know, probably started recording it less than a year after Holy Diver. You got two strong albums out like that, and one helps keep the other one selling. And that's, I think, what happened there, because Holy Diver, it took a little while for it to be certified platinum. And I think once the Last in Line came out, then he just started selling a lot more copies of Holy Diver as well.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that happens with bands. You know, you come out with one album, people might not get it right away, and then all of a sudden they come out with another one real quick, and boom, it's just as good as that one, and it makes people go out and take notice, and they go out and buy them both. You know, so I mean, that really is a win-win for the band for sure. So Sacred Heart actually finished at 20. They charted out at 29. Dream Evil at 43. So oddly enough, I mean, that's a weird one. Who would have thought Dream Evil would have charted higher than Holy Diver? Very strange. But you know, that's the way charts are. You know, you can't always go by charts. You got to go by sales, really. That's what tells the true picture a lot of the time. So, well, that takes care of Dio. Let's go through the rankings here, and what do you let's see, what do you got for number 10?
10, I had Angry Machines.
We agree. That's what I got as well.
Yeah.
All right, number 9.
9, I had Master of the Moon.
Okay, mine would be Magica. And what do you got for 8?
8, I had Lock Up the Wolves.
Killing the Dragon. 7?
7, I had Killing the Dragon.
Close there. Yep. I got Master of the Moon.
Okay. 6, I had Magica.
Okay, I got Strange Highways.
Strange Highways was 5 for me.
Okay. I've got Lock Up the Wolves at 5.
All right. 4, I had Sacred Heart.
I've got Dream Evil.
All right. Dream Evil was 3.
Sacred Heart, 3.
2, I had Last in Line.
And I got Holy Diver.
And obviously, Holy Diver's 1 for me.
And
it's always going to be one of my favorite albums of all time. So.
Yep, and I got The Last in Line. So, yeah. So I mean, obviously, like we thought, the first couple albums of the catalog were pretty much all in the lower echelons, where 1, 2, 3, 4. So the only one we really disagreed on really bad was Lock Up the Wolves. Would you have that one at?
I had that at number 8.
Number 8, yeah, mine was 5. Other than that, we were pretty much right on, within an album or two. So we both pretty much agree on the rest of the catalog, most of the catalog for sure, which is not always easy to do. But especially the more albums you got out, the more you got to rank, the more of a chance you're not going to line right up. But yeah, this was a good one. I really enjoyed going back into this catalog and giving it a good listen. Sometimes you don't always get a chance to listen to certain albums, and it was really good pulling back out Dream Evil and Strange Highways for that matter. That was really shocking. I mean, I never really got into that album when I got it. I didn't really like it that much. So, I put it away, put it aside. And it was really good digging that one out because I appreciate it a lot more now. And that's why I like these rankings. It helps open up, it gives us our chance to not only express our opinion, but it might give somebody listening or watching, hey, I never really gave that album a listen, and now I did, and I really like it. It helps turn people on to some music that they may have missed, like myself.
When Strange Highways came out, I don't think people were looking for a Dio album at that point because obviously it was like the middle of the Seattle scene. So. Yep,
you got a point there. That's for sure. All right, sounds good, man. Well, yeah, I appreciate your time. This was a good one. This was fun. We'll have to do it again down the road. We got some ideas lined up here, and if anybody else has anything they want us to tackle at ranking, shoot us a message on the link below and let us know.